Hey everybody, before we get started, I just want to remind you this episode is brought to you by patrons like Ago Comics, Qua, Jeremy Vasquez, Kylie Denton, Nestor Flores, Sodasan0424, and Videomaster75. If you like what we do and want to see us do more, consider supporting us on Patreon. You can get access to episodes early and lots of other goodies, and it really help us out. Thanks for your support, everybody. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. And it is time for another Enter the Dojo. Yes, I said I'd do 2 a month. Well, I don't know if this will actually come out in the same month, but I'm recording it in the same month. Hopefully we'll get it turned around in time. And so, yeah, we're here. So I thought a lot about what I wanted to do. There's a lot of stuff going on. I figured out, thinking about some stuff I know I said I wanted to do with Shugenja. So I decided to kind of do that, but also focus mostly on what I wanted to focus on, which was I want to talk about schools I want to talk about. Basically. That sounds a little redundant, but yeah, no, I want to do stuff that interests me. So I decided today to do the Kaito Shrine Keeper school, for a couple of reasons, because it lets us talk about some invocation stuff, and it also lets us talk about some other stuff. And since we're still in the intro, we'll talk about some of those concepts before we even get into the school. But if this is your first time here, or it's been a while, Enter the Dojo is basically where I break down a school. I'm going to talk about what you get out of it, what options you can pick for it, what options you don't have to pick that you definitely get, what they do, stuff like the school ability, analyze their curriculums, what kind of technique choices you can make, which might be good with your school. We break down a little bit about how the clan and family can influence the school, though obviously in 5th edition you don't have to play a character from the family or clan to be in the school, but I've said this in previous episodes, if I had to include literally every possible clan family combo with a school, we'd be here even longer than we're going to be here already, and we're already going to be here like an hour. So, hopefully the advice on clan and schools for the specific clan will help you pick if you're picking out of clan stuff. Same way as we don't talk about advantages and disadvantages and stuff, because we'd be here forever. There's only just going to be more. So, yeah, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some other options. Now, before we get into the school, like I said, there's a couple of areas I want to cover. First off, I want to talk about the monk tag. So, I've seen a little bit of confusion, dare I say even consternation sometimes from some players. I feel like mostly they're from the older editions of the game, but some people are quite surprised by the Kaito and the fact that they are tagged a monk school, but they don't have any Kiho. Where's the Kiho, as everybody says? Well, I think to that you have to understand what FFG means by the school tags. First off, I'm pretty sure the intent is not for the tags to be a hard and fast class system. You can get mixtures of tags. There are some schools which are tagged Courtier and Bushi. There's at least one school that's tagged Bushi and Shugenja. Artisan is usually used as a sub-tag and stuck in lots of places. There are some schools that are not just monk schools. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of stuff going on. When you actually read the section on roles when it talks about picking your school, the core book, mostly refers to monks and Shugenja in the same breath, the same passages, stating that when you are figuring out your duty between you and your GM and trying to pick what your character is actually supposed to be doing, what their assigned role is to their lord and so on, that monks and Shugenjas handle supernatural or spiritual things. They are priests, spiritual advisors, spiritual investigators, etc., depending on what your exact school is. So, obviously, there are more Kiho-focused monk schools now than there are ones with invocations, thanks to Shadowlands. Maybe that'll come back around, I don't know. But that's how they are right now. And that doesn't necessarily mean, though, that Kiho is exclusive to monks. There are a couple of entirely free of monk-tagged schools in Phoenix that also have access to certain Kiho, like Shiva Guardian. Took me a second to think of that one there, sorry. So, in general, my interpretation of what the book and the rules mean by a monk tag is basically they are a supernatural-facing school. They have supernatural abilities of some sort, but they're not quite normal Shugenja. And if you read a lot of the fluff behind the Kaito, they are not necessarily Shugenja in the same way that, say, an Asawa is a Shugenja, or an Asawa Shugenja is a Shugenja, I should say. technically not every Asala is a Shugenja, though they do only have the Shugenja school right now. But they can do invocations in certain respects, but they are not necessarily speaking with the kami in the way that you would do that, so much as they kind of become a vessel through which the kami affect things, you know? And they can't necessarily, say, hold a casual conversation with a kami, any more so than anybody with Commune with the spirits can. So they are not necessarily... They have a special relationship with the kami, but not in the way that makes them able to just belt out invocations. And in fact, when we move to the next slide, you'll see they don't get access to invocations for free. They can only pick up certain ones, and we'll talk about more of that later. So the Kaito have a very unique relationship with invocations and with the kami, but they are not quite Shugenja. A similar thing applies to the Fortunist Monk School in Emerald Empire, which we might talk about someday, which is a person who belongs to a spiritual order. They have a spiritual connection to certain kami, i.e. fortunes that they worship, and through this kind of faith and dedication, they can make themselves heard on a little bit more of a regular basis than just your average priest, but they are not like a Shugenja in that they can just belt out invocations whenever. And it's also important to note that though they are tagged monk, the Kaito are like the Togashi Order, like the Kuni Wardens in Shadowlands. They are a samurai family, they are samurai trained, but what their school teaches and what their calling is much more ascetic and priestly. The Shrine Keepers, maintain shrines, they perform rituals at shrines, they cleanse them if there's anything bad, they can be good at spotting certain spiritual imbalances and stuff. And in the ongoing story, Shiba Sukune, the new Phoenix Clan champion, is kind of using them as her spirit police force, her, spiritual detectives. Hey, go out there, check on all these shrines and stuff out in the world and see where this elemental imbalance thing is coming from. But that's deepest lore shit that we don't need to talk about. So that's the first thing, is talk about the monk tag. In that basically, I don't think they're meant to be hard and fast rules no more. And the second is, we're going to take a brief opportunity to talk about some special rules with invocations that haven't come up before, because we've only talked about Bushi School, basically. Which reminds me, I need to tuck in a Courtier school. We'll talk about what schools I'm going to do next after this. But basically, when you're doing an invocation, there's a couple things you can keep track of. Now, technically, these say the Shugenja a lot, but I think in this case, it can be termed as the caster. They are the one doing the magic. So I don't think that necessarily, because tags are not usually a hard and fast rule, these are not necessarily meant as a hard and fast stopper. But first off, is offerings. So Shugenja can give offerings to improve their invocations, and if you give a proper offering, you have to make a material offering. You can reroll up to 3 dice showing blank faces, then the material offering is consumed. I see no reason in particular why Kaito can't do this. And in fact, you can probably do it with their Sacred Arrow abilities, but we're going to talk about that in a second, like I said. Second up, channeling. So this is an interesting thing. You have to kind of try and do an invocation, work on some stuff, attune some powers to flow, and you can do some stuff. So when you make a check to perform an invocation, you can, after choose kept dice, you can choose to channel those dice. And instead of resolving the effects on the die for the check, you pocket the die. It's similar to striking as air. You pocket the dice, and then if during your next turn you perform an invocation of the same element, you're channeling the same element, you can pop those die in. You roll 1 fewer die of each type for each one you've reserved, and at the end, you add those to the results. You can only channel during conflict, you can channel a number of times. Outside of conflict, you can only channel once, and it doubles the time the invocation takes. So basically, you can kind of work on an invocation to prep up the spell and let the energies flow. But then what you actually do is you actually work your first prayer into the second spell and work on it. I don't know how easily this works with the ability, but I guess you can technically channel. You are making an invocation check. So that can be used, but obviously you may or may not want to actually channel dice because it's pretty easy to cast spells with your school ability. We'll see if that comes up anymore in our discussion. But yeah, it's like that. And it's important to note that, first of all, if you do any action that's not an invocation of the same element, channel dice are lost. And if you become dazed, silenced, or unconscious while channeling, the dice are lost. Third thing, spiritual backlash. This is also very important for you to know because you are casting spells. If your check generates 3 or more strife symbols on kept dice, you suffer spiritual backlash. You receive 3 fatigue because you tax your body, and then based on the element you do, something bad happens, which your GM will keep track of. So that's something that's important to remember when you're spellcasting. And like I said, I feel like the term the Shugenja is basically meant to be the caster, and that Kaito and Fortunist monks should not necessarily get passes just because they're monks who also do invocations. Nor should characters who get an invocation on, like, Stolen Knowledge be given a free pass, right? This is one of the balancing things. There are quite a lot of invocations that can do a lot of weird and potent stuff, so you need to be on the ball with making sure that the restrictions the game has are in. The fourth thing is importune invocations. Basically, once per scene, if you know one or more invocations, you know one or more invocation, you can choose one invocation technique you have not learned, even if you don't meet the prerequisites, and make an offering to the kami. So the offering must be interesting and valuable to the character. It has to be important, but generally it has to be rare, if not unique. The item is lost forever. And then basically, if they like it, and that you can importune. So you can importune. As a Kaito, you will know techniques, invocations. You start with an invocation. However, it is important to note, we'll talk about this again in a second, your Sacred Arrows ability explicitly says an invocation you know, so you can't importune into your arrows. But importuning is another interesting thing that comes up, that if you can make certain sacrifices, which your GM always has final call on. I know some people would like better guidelines, but I think this is supposed to be like a real technical thing. You can importune and get other spells. So you got a little bit of flexibility, but that's mostly like a desperation thing. Alright, well, now that we've wasted way too much time on the preamble, talking about stuff you need to know about invocations before we get into this, let's go ahead and talk about the Kaito School. And if you'll recall, remember, we talk about the school and its techniques first, then we kind of go back to previous answers in the 20 questions to, like, talk about stuff that combos with them. So, here we are. Kaito Shrine Keeper, the actual school description. They're tagged monk. Your ring increases air and water. It's pretty core to the school. Now, here's an interesting thing also about monk schools. Monks get to pick 4 skills, typically, as opposed to most. As far as I know, every Bushin and Courtier school gets 5, and normally pure Shugenja schools only get 3. Clearly, they spent most of their time in basic training, learning how to invoke, and thus have less skills. But you got 4 options to pick from. So you can pick fitness, martial arts ranged, meditations, performance, smithing, and theology. These are arguably your core skills. You know, I'm not quite sure why there's so much smithing focus. I guess because of the tradition with arrows and so on, so those are pretty important. But it's there, so you might as well. Also, technically, I guess smithing is repair anything, like, non-artistic-y. So there's something to be said for, like, fixing, you know, a broken shrine gate or something might be an earth smithing check, rather than some other skill. So there's that. I'm also not quite so sure why they have quite so much fitness focus, but I guess they are an ascetic tradition. They do live up in the mountains, and they're trained there, so there's that. Obviously, if you're asking me, I think you're a school that's invoking, so that's going to be lots of theology rolls, so you should pick theology. You're also all about archery, so you should pick martial arts ranged. That just makes sense. From there, you've got 2 more. That really depends on what you want to do. Meditation is a good pick for a lot of reasons, obviously. Your monks or priests, shrine maidens, that sort of thing. Performance can be interesting, and it gives you a social option. But smithing actually gives you an artisan option too, and then fitness is just a very useful skill to have all around. So you kind of got to pick, and I think having only the 4 options does make you kind of narrow that choice down. Only you can really settle that. whether you're maybe more of a, I don't want to say theatrical, but if you're the kind of character that trained in this school who is more, I'm going to actually get in there and repair things, fix things, make things, or if you're more of a, I'm the one who performs the rites, I do the traditional song and dance, as it were, to get things done. Or if maybe you're both, technically you can fit both in there. Depending on what your clan and family picks are, you might also already have some theology, so maybe you don't need to go that hard in it. You can live with only, one or two, but probably not. You probably want to go all the way. That said, though, we'll talk about that when you talk about your school ability in a second, because that gives you a lot of leeway. You have Honor 45, pretty typical, nice middle range. And here's, like we said, the big note. You can only take freely kata rituals and shuji. You cannot freely take invocations. You can't freely take kiho. And in fact, once again, reiterate, there's no kiho at all in this package. You do get a very refreshing birth of starting techniques, though. So first off, you get the Kata Hawk's Precision. This is why you should probably make sure to take some martial arts ranged. So you can adjust the range of your shots. Pretty good, pretty typical. Very handy also with your abilities that come up. Fairly standard starting, basic butt thing. You get 1-to-1 spends on opportunity to increase your range to a maximum of 6. Now, you also get an invocation to start. That's right, you start with one. And that is Tempest of Air, a rank 1. Basically, what this does is you make a TN3 Theology Air check, targeting each character at range 2 to 3 of you normally. If it succeeds, you get a smite. Everybody takes damage equal to your air ring and must resist with a fitness check or be disoriented, and then you can spend the air opportunity to each target who fails the fitness check is also pushed 1 range band away from you per op spent. So, that's basically defining your character pretty start. You can call on air to burst out from you, and you have to worry about friendly fire in this, because I believe it's, let me double check that, is that it's targeting each character at range 2 to 3, so everybody who's range 2 or 3 of you takes the damage. So you gotta be careful about blasting your friends. However, I think this is as good a time as any. We'll talk about your rituals in a second. Let's talk about Sacred Arrows, your school ability. So, this has 2 parts. First, as an action, you may augment one of your arrows with a prayer to the kami. So, first, you make the check to perform one invocation we talked about this earlier. You reduce the TN by your school rank. So, you remember how that's normally a TN3 check to do that Tempest of Air? Now it's a TN2 check. Just for your starting character. And as you get higher, it goes above. I'm pretty sure the generic rule, is that TN1 is your minimum, but still, that means that with this ability, you're going to whittle down those target numbers, and so you're going to be able to keep more opportunity, and you're going to be able to maximize more bonus successes, if that matters, so it's a very handy ability. You record the result after you make this check. Your arrow, that you've done this, gains the sacred quality and remains infused with the invocation until the end of the scene. After you perform an attack using the arrow, or at the GM's discretion, you fire it at a location, so if that you can also target terrain and inanimate objects. You can resolve the effects of the invocation from the place the arrow landed. So, first of all, you start with Hawk's Precision, which means if you spend enough opportunity on an attack check, you can shoot your arrows all kinds of places. You can shoot it up to range 6. And then it would go off at that location, because you can resolve it from the place it ended. So you shoot this out to several ranges, and then it resolves on everybody range 2 to 3 of you. Oh wow, all my friends are back here. There's lots of enemies far away. You can blast them first, and then your friends can move up. Just talking about Tempest of Air. You can spend 1 opportunity plus to delay resolving the effects of an invocation for 1 round per opportunity spent. And if you miss an attack, you can spend 2 op from a failed check to affect 1 target of the attack that you missed. So, you could miss shooting a guy with an arrow, and maybe still blow him up with Tempest of Air or something. Honestly, Tempest of Air is not something you want to shoot at a dude, specifically, because it's range 2 to 3, it's, a zone, but something you'd shoot at a place, and then hit people at range 2 to 3 of that place. But yeah, so that's your core ability, and this is going to define a lot of what the choices I'm going to say you may or may not make or should not make. You can make all kinds of choices, but what options I think you should pick for your school, because quite frankly, there are quite a few invocations that don't really work with sacred arrows. They do nothing if you shoot them away from yourself. They do nothing if you aren't touching people. I mean, yes, technically you could shoot somebody with an arrow and then have, say, Path to Inner Peace in it, and then they heal better, but that's not helpful to you. There are lots of other abilities where this doesn't work out well, so there's that. And we'll talk about that more when we talk about your invocation choices. The also beautiful thing is this, remember that it gives you the sacred quality, so there's lots of opportunities for supernatural greebles where you can just spend an invocation, whether or not you can actually use its effects to make your arrows sacred and shoot them. Very, very useful. So, this is also one of those schools that gets to start with rituals. 2, actually. You choose 2 from 3. You can pick Cleansing Rite, Commune with the Spirits, of Threshold Barrier. Now, almost everybody can take rituals except those darn dirty Kolat. But most don't get them right in their curriculum, right? They don't necessarily get them for free. Some do, though, and you actually get a later opportunity to buy. So I feel like we don't necessarily talk about that, but we can talk about some of these. Most of these are downtime actions. I think, in fact, all of them are downtime actions. Yeah, rituals are performed during downtime and potentially other skeins at the GM's discretion. I think I said skeins, but that doesn't matter. So, Cleansing Rite is a downtime activity, which is a void check. You can't remove Shadowland's Taint, but you can remove the afflicted condition on a target. You can target up to 5 characters, and then basically you can be like, are you an otherworldly being? You can sense, if an otherworldly being is among your targets, you can sense them, you can do additional targets, you can hit an area and remove the defiled terrain, etc. Very handy for a lot of things going on, but still, it's a TM3 void check you gotta cast as a downtime activity. You can do Commune with the Spirits, which is basically as a downtime activity as a support action, or a support action you can make a low-level theology check, depending on a ring, and appeal to nearby spirits for aid. And if you appeal to Void, you can speak to your ancestors or other supernatural presences that aren't elemental kami. If you succeed, you choose a boon, so there are a couple. You can sense the kami, you can detect the spirits and uses of magic with range bands. You can learn fact the spirits know about the area, or you can get an elemental gift. This is the one you probably see the most. I think there are quite a few Shugenja schools which get this one, actually do get this as a starting ritual. But theoretically, anybody with rituals can learn this. So anybody with a little bit of piety and a little bit of knowledge can get general guidance. And elemental gift, so gives you some stuff like maybe you can make it rain a little bit, find some water, and you can spend some ops some ways. And then the last is Threshold Barrier. This is a really useful one. It incorporates a couple of different effects. Basically, you pick a ring, and then you can protect thresholds, areas, and stuff with a seal that are barred, and if they are of the type, they have to make a meditation check or be repelled. And then you become aware of the entry. So, air blocks otherworldly beings such as spirits and ghosts. Earth blocks living tainted beings. Fire blocks undead beings with corporeal form. Water blocks wild animals. Void blocks humans. That's right, you can make people go away. Which ones did you pick? I don't know. I mean, I think Commune with the Spirits is very effective for you. On the other hand, as a Shrine Keeper, Cleansing Rite and Threshold Barrier are super in your wheelhouse. Talk to your GM about what your campaign's going to be like and what you think will come up more. If you're going to be playing a campaign where people are not necessarily going to become afflicted, or defiled terrain is not necessarily going to crop up, you know, like, you're not necessarily going to directly tackle Maho or Shadowland stuff, you can probably skip it. If you are going to tangle with a lot of Maho and Shadowland stuff, that's pretty required, because otherwise you can get into some bad news with with Afflicted Condition. And Threshold Barrier is just so useful. It's so utilitarian. So these are your starting techniques and stuff. Also, your starting outfit, you start with Sanctified Robes, you get a Wakizashi, because you are in fact a samurai. You get a Yumi, you get a Quiver of Arrows. You can pick her a bow or a knife, depending on what you want. Pretty typical stuff, mundane stuff. You get a scroll satchel and a traveling pack. And that's basically it for the initial setup to your school. Like I said, I think there's a couple kind of flavors you can kind of see from the way this starts, but in general, you're pretty on focus. You have this weird thing with arrows. There's a lot of spirituality connected to arrows and arrow divination in the Kaito School. You have the special ability of invocations. You can do your sacred arrows and other fun stuff. And you actually do rituals to, cleanse stuff, threshold barriers, that kind of stuff. You're actually doing real work. in that respect. So you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You keep shrines. You know meditation, you know theology, you got a little bit of invocation knowledge, you're good with a bow, but what you get the wealth of is rituals. You get 2 of them, 2 whole rituals. Now, let's go ahead and talk about those techniques you can pick. Let's talk about the curriculum. All right, let's talk about the curriculum. As usual, ignore the left side of your screen completely. We'll talk about that in the second half of this. But first, let's talk about your for suresy stuff. So, first off, before we go anywhere, this is important to note, based on the current rules as written, with clarification from FFG, if you miss a special access, the little diamond note mark, in a rank, you don't get to go back and take those if you go to a further rank. You missed out on the secrets, and if you want to go back and learn stuff from your earlier rank, your sensei's not going to have it. So, because you as a Kaito have very limited access to invocations, and they're also kind of your thing, you're going to want to always, like 100% of the time, pick your invocation options first, so you make sure you get them, alright? That is very important. Unless you will, really don't like a particular invocation, like in some of the specific ones, and want to skip it, make sure you pick these up, because you don't get them back. Okay. This is always important to note for certain stuff, like we've talked about this before with kata and other techniques, but this is very important because you only get your invocation access through these special slots. And some of them you don't, like I said, you don't get to go back. You got a couple Earth invocations in here, and you have no options to pick those up later. So, in your first rank, you kind of see what you saw in the starting skills. You've got Scholar Skills as a skill group. You probably want to pick Theology, but who knows, you might pick up another one. You can pick up some other stuff in there. Culture might be relevant. Medicine could be relevant, I don't know, Sentiment maybe, but you're probably going to go Theology with that option. And then you have some combat skills here, Fitness, Martial Arts Range, Meditation. Again, depending on what your character is actually doing, you may or may not want to focus on those. You probably want to pick up the Martial Arts Ranged, because that is, in effect, kind of how you will apply some of your invocations. You will be using them to tack onto guys who you hit with it or shoot near, etc. Because I will say that I don't think it's uncalled for your GM to make you make probably like a support action or something to shoot a zone specifically. Like, you want to land an arrow in a specific spot so you can launch invocations from it. So you want to be good at shooting arrows. And then Meditation or Fitness are, like we said, kind of whatever. You do have one kata option here, Striking as Air. Okay. Everybody should know, Striking as Air is probably the weakest striking as. You have to pull dice out of a check, and then you don't get to add them to your next check you replace. So it's very wishy-washy. I would really only bother if you're, say, rolling a huge check that you know that you're going to succeed, but you don't necessarily want a lot of the opportunity for instance. You're only going to use a little bit of opportunity, and you might want to roll those later. Like, for instance, you've rolled your Sacred Arrows, you put an invocation in an arrow, you've shot the arrow definitely hit the guy, you don't necessarily need the, delay or any of the other special effects on the actual attack. You're making an air shot, you want to pocket a couple of the opportunity for your next invocation. Okay, sure. There's some places where that work, but mostly it's just you're basically pulling out of your pocket for one turn to move into the next. It's not as completely useless as I think some people think it is, but it's definitely super situational. So if you don't feel like you need it, don't bother. What you do want to bother about, though, is that invocation. You have special access to Bind the Shadow, which, if I'm not mistaken, is that's a rank 2 Earth invocation you get early. So this is a pretty good one. You get to make an attack action Earth, choosing an otherworldly target, normally at range 0 to 2. If you succeed, you smite and purify the target, so they are immobilized and silenced, and they do it for a number of rounds equal to your Earth Ring. You can make that until the end of the scene by binding them. With 2 opportunities, you can make it bound for 1 year, increase the TN. If you can get 4 opportunity, you can make it so the target is immobilized and silenced for 100 years, which is really rad. And hey, guess what? If you get a high enough rank with Sacred Arrows, you can probably save that much opportunity, okay? So, it's called an attack action, but they don't take any damage, but still. You can shoot an otherworldly being, bind them up. This is 110% your wheelhouse. This is what you're doing as a Shrine Keeper. If there's an evil spirit or something about, you want to be able to bind the shadow on them and be like, no, dude, go away. You don't get to do shit. So that's a really good one to pick up. It works well with your arrow. Super thematic, by the way, to try and get that 4 opportunity spend, drop that on there. Stick that guy, stick him to a tree for 100 years or something crazy like that. So that is super in your wheelhouse, and we'll talk about air invocations later. Now, if you get to progress to your 2nd rank, you get some interesting combos here. This is martial skills is 1, so well, obviously, you could use this to pick up a more ranged on theme. You can also use it to pick up tactics, meditation, fitness, unarmed or melee if you want to put that in your curriculum. Obviously, you can pick up those skills anytime if you need them, but it's a good opportunity to make them count. And then you've got performance, theology, and smithing. So this kind of goes back to what we were talking about. Theology is up there. You can get better at knowing spiritual stuff and also casting invocations. Always good. Performance ties in. It's one of your few social options, though. Hey, there is a social skills general in your 3rd rank. We're going to spoil that for you. So that's an opportunity to, in curriculum, take a social skill of any type and have it count. And once again, I should reiterate, don't take this as a strict thing. Your curriculum, you can take out of curriculum skills and stuff. It's just, we're talking about what makes you count for your curriculum for your advancements. So, ostensibly what your character is about in their school. So you're about performance. You can perform, certain rituals. You can do, folk songs. Certain kind of spiritual dances and stuff are mentioned. Playing music also helps. That's kind of on point to you, but can also be useful in other areas. And then you got a smithing. So, now this is an interesting one. I think it's kind of a quick patch, but I believe in the original printed version, Divination wasn't on here. It was another kata, which didn't make sense because you'd have the same technique group, so you could technically double up. So you want to avoid that. So you can get Divination at this rank, which is a rank 1 ritual. It's on purpose. If you want to make it count in full, here's your time. You probably, for thematic reasons, want to pick up Divination, because Divination is something the Kaito are known for, so I think that's kind of good that they snuck it in there, even if it's a rank 1 ritual at rank 2, but you can basically perform an omen. You pick a target, you read their fortune, and then you pick a skill group, and they get to add Opportunity Strife to it, basically. If you fail, your GM gets to pick the omen, which isn't really that bad. So Divination is a really neat ability. It just takes a downtime. Can do some stuff. So that's on theme for you to perform these divinations, so you can pick it up. But you may also just as easily have picked it up in rank 1, because you can. So, yeah, there's that. Now, here's the other thing. You also have Grasp of the Air Dragon as a special technique access, which is normally a rank 3 invocation, so you really are going to want to take this one too. Now, what this does is it's a support action. You target a character at range 3 to 5. You summon a wind, moves the target a number of range bands equal to your air rank, plus bonus successes for a maximum of 6. Ignoring their terrain, you set the target down gently, or slam them with full force, if you do it, depending on the action type you picked. If you slam them, they have to roll a fitness check or suffer the effects of a fall. You can increase the maximum range by 1 higher. You can increase the height of the fall they suffer. So, it can be an attack action, so that makes perfect sense to put in your arrows. You shoot a guy with an arrow, and then you throw him up in the air and move him around. It can also be used just in general to do range control. You're good at shooting people at range. Oh, shoot, there's a guy at range 5 of me who I'd really like to be in range 3 or range 2. I'm going to swoop him in and also knock him over. And it can have support effects. You can put your allies in places and be like, yo, I'm going to hop up there. And technically, using your arrows, you can use this to affect targets that are not normally in your range. Because you can shoot a guy. Let me double check the exact range on a Yumi. Yumi is... yeah, range 2 to 5 normally. So, technically that lets you, with this invocation, affect a guy at range 2 of you, as opposed to range 3. So, that can be very helpful. Otherwise, yeah, very on theme, very helpful to you. Rank 3, we mentioned it before, you can pick social skills. This lets you branch out if you have a social area you want to count towards your curriculum. Gives you a little bit of flexibility. You can take medicine, which I mentioned is a possibility for scholar skills earlier, so now here's another opportunity to take it in curriculum if that's your style of thing. It can very much be. And we'll talk about this more when we get into some of your invocation choices, but theoretically it's possible for you to be a bit of a traditional Shugenja character and take stuff like Path to Inner Peace. That doesn't necessarily mesh with your core abilities, but you can take them if you wanted to build your character out that more way. And I know that a lot of water-themed Shugenja sometimes end up this way because they are one of your few sources of magical healing. So, You also get survival as an option. That's a pretty decent one. You don't really get... what's the word I'm thinking of? I've completely forgotten the skill category for stuff like labor and whatnot. Trade skills, there it is. Took me a second. Had to look in the book. You don't really get an opportunity for a lot of trade skills, so like labor and survival are pretty good to take in your curriculum and get your full XP bonuses if you're moving up. If not, take them when you need to take them. So you get 2 kata choices at this one you can take. You can get Flowing Water Strike, which Flowing Water is pretty good for you. So we've talked about that before, I think, but we'll mention again what it does. It's you have to be in water stance and you have to make an attack and movement action. But you can target a character at range 0 to 2 regardless of their usual restriction. And you make them bleed and you make them suffer. You make them suffer core damage based on your water ring, but if they fail a check, they increase the physical damage by your weapon's base damage. For an archer, Flowing Water is a perfect opportunity. That means you can shoot people at range 0, normally something you can't do, and possibly still have it count for stuff. And oh, hey, by the way, you're a freaking Kaito, so that means you can blast those guys with arrows and drop invocations on them, which is very handy. So it's a very flexible one. You'll probably want to pick this up. It's in your wheelhouse. Water and air are your... Water, air, and void really are your core rings, but everybody wants, some amount of void, because that's how building up your rings work. You can also use Flowing Water Strike to remove conditions from yourself, which is helpful. So that's a good one, but also you can take a Breath of the Wind, which is an air-focused kata, which lets you spend air opportunity to make the target resist or suffer disoriented and extra fatigue. So that can be pretty helpful to disorient people and get stuff out of it. You get early access, so you may as well take it if you're, more of a combative type. I've mentioned before, you could possibly branch in unarmed. That makes a decent choice for unarmed, short blow, knock the air out of them. But it's not super important, but hey, you have early access, so you can take it if you want. Now moving into rank 4, your scholar skills return, and then it's basically the same skill spread as rank 1, so scholar skills, fitness, martial arts, range, meditation. Whichever one of those you're focusing on, feel free to take them. If you want to branch out your scholar skills, go for it, or just take more theology. You've got a rank 1 to 4 kata option we'll talk about in a little bit, then you've got an invocation, and a other extra kata. So, normally I recommend for lots of people Soul Sunder when you get it, because it's one of the few ways that high-level samurai get to actually affect otherworldly creatures, otherwise it's really hard. It's really hard to punch a ghost. Now, if you're a Kaito, Sacred Arrows covers most of that for you, but, you can still, increase the deadliness when you do that for Sacred, so that works. That also means you don't have to keep popping arrows if you're consistently. You can do some other stuff, like immediately perform a strike, so it can be helpful. I don't think it's as necessary for your character, but it can be on theme and can be useful. Also, like I said, God forbid if you've branched out into other weapon types, like if you went into a little bit of melee to work on that bow you've got or something, the bow staff, not the bow, the shooting, not a Yumi, that can be helpful. Actually, I think, choose a readied weapon. I was like, it doesn't have to be a katana, right? No, don't think so. It doesn't have to be anything special. You can make a stick sacred, so that can be helpful too. But like I said, it's kind of less important for you. And then you also get Rise Air. Hey, spoiler, all the Rise spells are pretty similar. What this does is you make a pretty tough support check. You summon a air kami to fight for you, which does some stuff. Now, I'm pretty sure since it says summon at a location, that means you can put it in an arrow and shoot it, and you want bonus successes on this check, so that's always a thing. So this meshes well with your school ability. It's on theme for you. So, sure, why not? So you work your way up to rank 5 from there. Martial skills again, good group. You get an interesting spread here. You can actually take Point of Command. I don't think there's a lot of call for that earlier in your curriculum, but I'm sure as you start to get up there, maybe the implication is that you will be commanding other more minor Shriner Gardens under you, or maybe you can, leverage your high rank into higher levels of respect and stuff. Which also, you did get a social skill option. Maybe that'll dovetail if you went that route earlier. It's here. And Sentiment and Theology are here. So it can be useful. And then, so, for your technique choices, you can get Pin the Fan. That's a good one to take just in general because, well, there are only like 3, ranged katas in general. ranged combat katas. And Pin the Fan's really good. So you do the range check equal to their vigilance. If you succeed, they suffer double base damage, basically, plus bonus successes. And then if they are incapacitated, they suffer a critical strike with one opportunity spend equal to double deadliness plus bonus successes. So it's a really critical strike that lands on stuff. And once again, remember, you're Kaito. That means you can have sacred arrows, and you can have other stuff going on in there. You can have an invocation in there. You can really ruin somebody's day with some heavy shit like that, okay? And then you can pick Tomb of Jade. If I'm not mistaken, that's an Earth invocation. I have to double check a lot of these invocations, because there's a lot of freaking invocations. So, what's that? Tomb of Jade. There it is, yes. That is a rank 5 Earth. So you make a failed Earth check. Target, normally at range 1 to 0, so that's good for your thing. And then the target is, if you succeed and the target is tainted, you purify it. They suffer damage, reducing their rings. Persist for a number of rounds. You get Earth ring plus bonus successes if their rings are reduced to 0 in this manner. Entirely turned to Jade. And it creates hallowed terrain. And then there's lots of other fun stuff. So, obviously, because this is bonus success based and it has a huge check, you can drop this down to a TN 1 check Earth. So even if Earth wasn't one of your prioritized rings, you can still do it pretty good. You can affect the range, and that means you can get bonus successes for lots of extra rounds, which will probably mean you're going to turn the target into Jade. Another super thematic ability, and one you're going to want to pick up because it works really well with your school. And then you got your invocations. Now you got your rank 6 ability, which is your mastery ability, Demon Be Gone. As an action, you make a TN3 meditation void check and pluck the string of a bow. You target each otherworldly being in a number of range bands equal to your meditation. If you succeed, each target suffers strike equal to your ranks of meditation plus bonus successes. And then if you spend an opportunity, they have to make a meditation check of their own, or treat their physical and supernatural resistance as 0 until the end of the scene. So, yeah, you make otherworldly creatures, ghosts, demons, whatever, basically want to die. You hurt them and can reduce their damage. A very good ability, a very good capstone to the Kaito and what they do. Alright, so before we delve into my technique recommendations, let's talk a little bit about the general curriculum now we got all through it. You can kind of see your themes here, so you have access to certain invocations. The ones you get for free tend to, be inside your wheelhouse of certain spiritual interactions, especially involving wind, or dunking on otherworldly enemies and tainted stuff. Tomb of Jade, Bind the Shet, etc. You know, you guys are Kaito Shrine Keepers. You are supposed to, perform exorcisms, keep shrines and other spiritual areas clear of impure influences, push them away, refresh the shrine. Like we said, there are a couple of different picks you can take. Theology and martial arts ranged are probably your two most core skills, because they fuel your abilities one way or the other. They fuel your invocations and your sacred arrows, and then ranged fuels your ability to actually hit things with your arrows and thus apply them. And also just shoot people. Sometimes you don't need to waste a sacred arrow. Meditation is important to you a lot. It comes up a lot with your rituals. It comes up with your mastery ability, so that's a pretty good third skill to tack in. You want to keep that for your stuff. Other than that, you're pretty freeform. You got a couple opportunities to take a couple of trade skills. Labor kind of makes sense. You want to get some work done repairing some stuff. Medicine can be useful to you if in scholarly skills. You do also get a little bit of sentiment in there. You get a little bit of command in there at the end, so maybe if you built up at other points. But in general, performance is kind of... Well, I say that, but performance appears in your curriculum as much as command does. It's just you have an option to take it from start. So, your social options are a little limited, but you can choose to branch out if you want, and stuff, and kind of figure out what your role is. And some of those choices to be in curriculum come later, so after you've had time to character development, and figure out where your character is kind of going in their life. So, let's talk about those technique recommendations. So, once again, I'm going to reiterate this. I think I said this before, but I'll reiterate it now, because we talked about a lot of other stuff. When I'm making invocation recommendations, I am recommending things which I think either make sense to your character, or which work with your Sacred Arrows ability. You'll see this right away. We're in air invocations. I have only recommended a couple of them, and then Yari of Air is basically, you're rank 1. If you're going to go a more melee route, Yari of Air works. You can also use it to work on melee weapons, or rather ranged weapons, not just melee with the opportunity spends, or pairs of weapons, so that can be pretty useful for, like, doing some fun tricks, but otherwise, it's, a little less focused. You've already got Tempest of Air, so the problem is that a lot of other air invocations are more illusory. So Cloak of Night renders a target invisible to the naked eye. That's not really helpful to you and doesn't really do anything with your Sacred Arrows. Nature's Touch lets you talk to animals, which is really cool. I love that invocation for just, fluff stuff, but at the same time, that doesn't really mesh at all with your Sacred Arrows ability. It targets yourself, So that can be useful if you want to go that route, but not. Token of Memory summons an illusory object. Again, that's not really in your style, but you could pick it. So, what I do think is in your style is you got Blessed Air and By the Light of Lord Moon. So, Blessed Wind, it means that when you target a position, so that means that's an obvious shoe-in for using your arrow to target a different position, because it's normally rank 0 to 3. You summon a wind, and it puts people in obscuring terrain, and it persists. So that can be useful to create blobs of obscuring terrain away from you. If you have friends who are melee fighters who push up or something else going on, you can, drop a little obscuring cloud and stuff on them, and they can be better off. Another really good one is By the Light of Lord Moon. This is that targets an area within a range of you. You scry for hidden things, and they are revealed to you. This can include magic stuff, include additional characters that can see things. So I think that because that's an area kind of thing, you can use that with arrows to extend that range by targeting a zone. And it kind of really fits, even if you don't use it with your arrows, it kind of fits your characters to be all up in there and investigating things, looking for hidden stuff, hidden secrets, flaws, magically concealed things. It works well for your character. And like I said, Yari of Air, hey, it's rank 1. If you're gonna take one of these, because there are a lot of these like this, it makes sense to pick this up maybe. If you do a melee route, it's good, or if you spend a point of opportunity, you can make it a ranged weapon. I will say this, there have been some discussion about whether or not you can combo Yari of Air into a Sacred Arrow. I don't think so. That's my personal argument, not unless you do certain specific moves, because the effect of activating the invocation, unless you... and actually, that's right, Yari of Air doesn't have the ability to immediately perform a strike. It's immediately perform a guard, so I don't think the effect of the invocation is to make an attack, it's to create a weapon. So, you shot somebody with an arrow, keeping in mind that your arrow's not necessarily in that person either after you attack them, right? It doesn't necessarily stick unless you perform a crit or something. So, I don't necessarily think you can double crit, because that's not really how the invocation effect is described, okay? But still, you got a couple of good ones that I think work for you. So, rank 1 to 2 kata. Oh, there's a couple things here. So first off, I have to recommend Pelting Hail, because you're a ranged fighter, and Pelting Hail is really good. You can make characters standing near your target take Strife. Choose a number of other characters at range 0 to 2, take of your target, give them Strife. Equal your base damage. So that's just good for you. Keep people at a distance, wear them down. And that's a pretty key one. But there are a couple other options you might want to pick up. You never know. You can pick up Striking as Water. Water is another one of your major rings, and Striking as Water is pretty good with your ability to ignore physical resistance. That can be very helpful for your archery style, I think. Very useful. Tactical Assessment isn't here because I think Tactical Assessment is just great. It's a great general access to new opportunity spends when you're doing initiative. Alright. Can be super helpful for a lot of things. And then there's another one, which is Lord Shiva's Valor. So this one comes up because it's a Phoenix-specific kata. And what this does is once per game session, you do a Tactics Void check, and you make characters focus on you. Other characters cannot select your targets as an attack or scheme action if they could attack you. So you pick your friends in range of your weapon, and nobody can attack people other than you. If they can affect multiple targets, they have to pick you first. So, with your spiritual defensiveness, right, you are possibly going to be doing a lot of banishing of evil spirits, calming of wild kami, other stuff like that. It can be on point for you, it can make sense for you to take this ability. It is a Phoenix-exclusive kata. You are a Phoenix family, or at least you're a Phoenix school. If you aren't in the Phoenix, and thus can't take this, though actually I'd have to double-check with the clarification. Does that mean you have to be from the clan? I guess probably. I'm trying to think. because this is a Phoenix Clan school, but whatever. If you are actually in the clan, just so there's no risk of weird corner cases, this can be a pretty good option to take. If you're not, well, you're not, but you've got lots of other good options. And I don't necessarily think Lord Shiba's Valor is for every Kaito. You really probably do want to pick Pelting Hail, but it says in range of your base weapon, you've got a ranged weapon, it can make sense as an option that you can take. So, 1 to 3 water invocations. Once again, I picked these mostly because they make sense for what you're doing with your Sacred Arrows. Dance of Seasons is a really good one where you target an area, a position containing a source of water, and then you can change that around. You can target new positions. You can encase a character in ice in the way, and so on and so forth. Like, you can do a lot of interesting things to affect the terrain, and combo that with your ability to take arrows and do lots of other fun stuff. So, that can be pretty useful to you. Alright, and that benefits from your ability to exchange rank. Hands of the Tides is a really weird one, but you get to basically swap positions with people and other stuff. You can cause them to change positions in space. Each target's original position will be occupied by a target, and each target must occupy a position, kind of thing. Doing this with your arrows, I think, works, because it's a high TN, and you can change the range up, maybe. Or you can also use it to delay, that kind of stuff. You give targets strife. You can put them in new positions. And it's still range 1 to 4, even if you don't, so you might be able to rearrange some stuff and take advantage of that for your range choices. It's not the strongest, but I think it can work. And then Strike the Tsunami is another rank 3, and you're picking rank 1 to 3, which is basically just an attack. It's a smite. Normally this is target number of characters equal to your water ring at range 0 to 3 of you. You can have a source of water. You smite the targets with the water. It does a little bit of damage and stuff. Can make them bleed. I think that this also works as kind of like a terrain thing. You can move it around, shoot people, maybe smack them with something if you miss. You don't know. Can be very useful. Now, this is where we kind of come into that thing where I talk about, like, if you're doing a different build with your invocations, you can do different stuff. You could try and do Bow of Water instead of Yari of Air. I think that by this point you're probably a little past that. Like, yeah, sure, it has snaring. You can use it to strike and modify its range and stuff, make it a ranged weapon, etc. So there's lots of interesting things you can do with that, but that's not necessarily on point. Plus, you already own a bow staff, dude. There's fun abilities like, Heart of the Water Dragon, Sympathetic Energies, the classic Path to Inner Peace, which heals. But those don't really make sense for your character with your abilities. Sure, Inari's Blessing or Reflections of Panku might make sense, maybe, but they're fairly low ranked. So with these invocations, you're really gonna have to pick what makes the most sense to you, because you only get, like, these small options. And like I said, like, I don't think, Rushing Wave might be cool, and so it might be Stride the Waves, but technically your school's up in the mountains. You're not like a Mantis Tideseer, you're probably not dealing with huge bodies of water to move stuff like boats and people and so on, or have to deal with swimming. Obviously, you need to make the best choice that makes sense for your character, but, like I said, it maybe doesn't make sense for you to take some of these options. So for rank 1 to 4 Kata, this was pretty simple to me. I couldn't think of a lot of stuff. So, Crashing Wave lets you resist with a check. You can attack on Bleeding Condition and additional Fatigue to your ranged attacks if you're in water, or even your other attacks too. That can be pretty useful to you. Thunderclap Strike is an air technique which lets you push people away from you. That can be pretty useful to shunt people out of range here and there, and lets you target areas. You make it's a close quarter, so you have to make melee run unarmed. But if you could, you can basically target each character in your range and push them around if they don't resist. So it can be pretty useful to you if you need to get range because people are all up in your grill. Now, you probably should have taken Flow and Water Strike, but maybe you want to, control stuff better. You want to get some distance. So Thunderclap can be pretty good. And obviously, as we mentioned in 1 to 2, there are a lot of different options. Maybe you didn't pick up one of those earlier and you don't want Crashing Wave or Thunderclap. You can go back and pick those up. And then lastly, at rank 1 to 5, you get Fire Invocations. This is your only real chance to pick up Fire Invocations, so I put a lot of recommendations on here. And I'm kind of going back and forth. I decided to put Rise Flame on here because you do get Rise Air, so that might make sense to you to summon a fire kami. But I also thought about what's the exact name of that one again? The Soul's Blade, an actual rank 5, because it's one of your rank 5 options and it's really good. So if you succeed, you can make a katana or naginata. It has to be a melee weapon, unfortunately, so there's no ranged. But there's a lot of stuff, and you can choose characters other than yourself to wield it, so that can be pretty handy. I decided not to go with that, because put it on the actual list because it's got the melee element, but that makes a good sub if you think so. So some of these others, though, are real good. And obviously, like I said, there's some lower ranks you might want to pick, but a Breath of the Dragon is a good one. Target one character at range 0 to 3, smite him with flames and those around them, make a big burst. That's good for arrows. Fury of Osano Wo is also really good for arrows. That's normally a very difficult one with a set ranged. You call forth lightning, smite the target, and do big damage to them, daze them, increases rating. Personally, I would almost always pick Fury of Osano Wo just because I love that being on theme, and also just, damn, that's a good one for you. Like, you can control the range, you can do it outdoors, stuff like that. Another one that might work is Ravenous Swarms. Ravenous Swarms, basically, you target a position containing a flammable object. If the object is consumed, you summon another fire emotes. The emotes follow you around and periodically set to other objects. Normally, you have to pick a flammable object at range 0 to 1, but if you're shooting an arrow, you might be able to target longer range. You can reduce your TN and stuff, which, when you're making an attack action, you can spend emotes to add bonus successes and stuff like that. And it can be a thing that can work with your ability. I don't necessarily think it's the best, but hey, it's there. You can throw some shit around. And the last one, Wings of the Phoenix. This is not necessarily an ability that makes perfect sense for your Sacred Arrows, but A, you're a Phoenix School, and it's really rad to just summon fire wings and float around. But also, this lets you manipulate the terrain. You can carry characters away if you need to. And you can move vertically and horizontally and ignore terrain. You are a ranged fighter, technically, so you can use Wings of the Phoenix to gain the advantage to move around the scene much more freely, control the range you engage people at. So that can be a really decent choice, I think, depending on what you want to do, alright? So yeah, and obviously there's lots of lower rank fire if you really, really run into a fire invocation that's like rank 1. But dude, you're rank 5. Take something big. And that's our technique recommendations. Like I said, there's lots of different little options you can take there. But remember, you're going to want to take those invocations when that opportunity comes up. That's really going to influence how you do. So well, that a long time about the school itself out of the way, let's talk about some of these options you can take and kind of how they reinforce, which can hopefully help you with some other character options. Let's talk real quick about the Phoenix Clan. The clan you will probably be in if you're playing a Kaito Shrine Keeper, but maybe not. But they really do mesh really well. So the Phoenix Clan, their ring they get is Void. That works very well for you as the Kaito Shrine Keeper. Void is kind of one of your, like I said, your secondaries. It's not directly keyed to a lot of your abilities, but it can be. And it ties to some of your more meditative abilities like rituals and your mastery ability eventually. So, Void's a good ring to have, obviously, for lots of reasons. Your skill is Theology, so, hey, that's in your wheelhouse right away. You do invocations. It's great for you. Your status is only 30. It's not 35. You're a non-core clan. You're not all bunched up around the Imperial lands. You're up there in the corners. So there's that, but decent. You have 4 families with the addition of Kaito, the Asako, the Isawa, the Kaito, and the Shiba. So, all in all, not much else to say here. They mesh really well with Kaito. You get the Void Ring increase for free, so you're looking at least 2 in that, depending on your family choice. You get 1 in Theology. Like I said earlier, if you'll remember, way back when we talked about the initial school starting stuff, you may not have to pick a high level of Theology because ideally you're getting TN discounts on your invocations, and you got a lot of opportunity to pick up Theology, so that might be a good way to branch out. But Theology is definitely one of your wheelhouse skills. We talk about this. And so let's wrap this up a little bit by talking about those families. So you've got 4 family choices. We'll do this in alphabetical order like usual. They all, in fact, fit on the screen. Thanks for once. So the Asako family, their ring is Arrow Fire. Air is obviously a core ring for your school if you're Kaito, so that makes a lot of sense. You could also pick up fire. You'll be doing fire stuff later, but that's like way later. Your skills are culture and sentiment. Not on point, but you do have that sentiment later. That can help kind of build a different character than the normal Kaito, give you an extra angle besides just doing mystic stuff, can be very helpful. You've got a glory of 40 and a starting wealth of 5 koku. I don't think there's much to say about Asuko. I feel like they're probably one of the big choices for this, than maybe Isawa. And obviously Kaito, duh, but they blend really well with some of their options and can give you a different sort of flavor. The Iwasawa family is Ring, Fire, or Void. Your skills are Meditation and Theology. Your glory is 44. Your starting wealth is 5 koku. Phoenix aren't super rich. So until the events of the novel, The Sword and the Spirits, which we're going to talk about very briefly at the end, mostly just to mention that you should pick it up. The Kaito were technically an Isawa vassal family, so that's probably why they're kind of similar, and also why Isawa meshes super well. Once again, Fire, maybe not your first choice, but it can be. And you've got Void. You're looking at 3 Void off here, and then you still get probably a pretty decent run. You know, you're at 2 Air and Water. You can bump one of those to 3 with your special ring adjustment. You can be pretty on point and be pretty voidy. Meditation is there. Oh, hey, here's your second point of Theology I was talking about. And also Meditation, which is another, like we said, kind of secondary skill for some of the stuff you do. It's a perfect fit. It's a great fit for a character who's, like we said, not necessarily a Shugenja. Maybe you weren't born with the Shugenja gift, but they still wanted to kind of nurture some mystical talents. You went off to the Shrine Keeper school. You can do some really good stuff. Obviously, Kaito family directly meshes really well. They are Air or Void. Their skills are Fitness or Theology. Like I said, I'm not really 100% sure why there's so much fitness focus in the Kaito. I guess it's because they literally live up in the mountains. Their home holding, you know, their capital, as it were, is called Cliffside Shrine. So there's a lot of climbing mountains involved, I guess. But yeah, it's there, so you can scratch some fitness off your list. And still get that Theology point we're talking about. Air is one of your primary invocation rings, and you can do some fun stuff with Air. Or you can get that Void in. You got a glory of 40 and a starting wealth of 4 koku. So Shiba is interesting. Their rings are Earth or Water. Water works for a Kaito, or Earth works, because you've got a couple of Earth invocations in there you probably want to be pretty good at, so either could work. Reflect a slightly different character. Your skills are Meditation and Tactics. If you wanted to take Lord Shiva's Valor, like we discussed, this is a great one to get in, because you'll get that point of Tactics for free, and Meditations, of course, go for you. You know, maybe you're more spiritual bent than a guardian-y bent. You know, you're meditative and contemplative, but you're not outright magic otherwise. But you're not, you know, cut out to maybe be a Bushi Courtier. Who knows? Starting with a 5 koku. So you can kind of see a lot of these mesh pretty well. One or both of their rings works perfectly well for the Kaito. In each case, the general Phoenix clan focus on meditation and theology, one way or the other, means that almost everybody works well. The Asuko's skills are a little out of place, but they could let you do kind of an interesting spin on the character. You can pick up more culture and sentiment later if you wanted to build that way and be on theme. You're just not going to be as, like, hyper-focused as other families might be. And obviously, like we said, if you're thinking about out-of-clan schooling, you know, this should help you kind of illustrate some of your decisions here. So, we're at the end. We're at the outro. Hey, like it says in the outro slide, read the novella, The Sword and the Spirits, if you want to learn a lot more about the Kaito. I recommend the physical version because it has that little appendix in the back, which is all about Kaito stuff. I didn't mention it earlier because I was kind of moving through stuff and didn't want to be distracted, but for instance, you know how I normally display the Mons? I displayed the Isawa Mon because, as far as I know, the Kaito Mon hasn't actually been illustrated, but it is described in the back, and it is said to be a variant on the Isawa style of the, you know, 5 elements coming together kind of stuff, like a, you know, 5-pointed star in a ring kind of thing, usually with like a moon or something. So I believe it's with a moon to kind of come together and illustrate that. But obviously there's no artist rendition, so I used Isawa because they used to be an Isawa vassal family. So the book is really illustrative of that, but also the actual body of the novella takes place almost entirely at Cliffside Shrine and deals with a lot of their stuff. Kind of helps put forward that their promotion to a great clan full family, not just a vassal family. and is helpful to understanding them. It really, besides just the description in the core book, but it really made me like the Kaito a lot and think they're super interesting. Even though, as discussed before, otherwise my general inclination leans much more towards dragon or unicorn. So it's a pretty cool subject to take in. You should look into that if you're interested in this school and some other stuff. So now we're just in regular outro stuff. Like I said, gonna try and do a couple of these a month. I still want to do a Shugenja school, obviously, just for the sake of actually comparing them, because they have like narrow skill choices. They can end up with more rituals, like we said. Not usually how Bushi and Courtiers work. I've realized that technically I've done 3 Bushi schools, so I should probably tuck a Courtier in there somewhere. I just don't know who yet. Or maybe a hybrid? I don't know. I'm kind of concerned about doubling up, because like lots of really good ones would be like, I think Asawa Elementalist is still a really good Shugenja school to start with, because they're very core. I could also talk about Iuchi, though. You know, get some of that unicorn in, and they have a very interesting ethos, but I don't know if they're the one I want to start on. I don't know. For courtiers, like, obviously, you know, Doji Diplomat's probably a really good idea, but there could be others. I haven't covered any line schools, so Ikoma Bard could be another good one. A lot of people say that one's pretty good, so that might be a good choice to do when I get around to courtiers. That said, I'm pretty sure, well, obviously we're staying in core schools for now. I'm like 99% sure my next coverage will be a shinobi school, and we're going to talk about the Shosuro Infiltrator, because that's super interesting. And I guess they're technically a courtier school, so I could, scratch that out of the way too. Maybe that doubles up. I'll still cover a courtier school before then. It's just I don't know if I'm going to rotate through. Because, like, for instance, I'd love to talk about Tadashi Monks, because they are a super iconic school with a very interesting mechanic that are completely different from how Kaito works, but are still tagged monk. It's kind of similar how we talked about how you will realize that the Hida school feels super different from, like, the Kakita or Miyamoto schools we talked about first. So that could be super interesting to talk about them. I just don't know if I want to double up on clans right away. I'm going to have to sooner or later. So maybe my rotation will be something like Shosuro School, the Infiltrator. Then we do like Iuchi Shugenja maybe. I could also do Mantis. I don't know how people feel about that. I don't know if I want to necessarily go into minor clan school before I've hit up every major clan also. Mantis isn't a great clan right now. It's a thing. And I could do Ikoma Bard for like a pure courtier perspective. I don't know about all that. If you have suggestions or preferences on what schools you want me to hit up first, let me know in the comments. Shosuro is definitely, I think, next on my list, because I want to look at ninjutsu, especially with Courts of Stone being soon, so I want to kind of talk about some of those concepts. And also, I just realized that Shosuro is a really well-focused, well-designed school, and I want to talk about them. It's kind of like what I said with, like, Kakita and Miyamoto, right? Like, they got a lot of focus. Arguably, Kaito and Hida have a lot of focus, and I've even talked about with Hida how there's a lot of different builds you can do. There's a couple different things you can do with Kaito, but they all seem to generally flow to the same point, which is you do certain types of invocations really well with your sacred arrows. But like Shosuro is I think pretty laser focused on a lot of elements, and they're just really freaking good at it. Like I understand some people are upset with the lack of Bayushi Bushi or any kind of Scorpion Bushi for lore reasons. Don't worry about that, guys. There are plenty of Scorpion characters who are tagged Bushi in the card game. They have Bushi, so don't take any heed to that argument. It's just that I don't necessarily agree, though, that those people are like, that FFG should have done it different. No matter what happened, somebody was going to be left out. I think I prefer their style of every family gets a school to call their own to start with, and then they're not afraid about doubling up on names later, obviously, as we've seen from stuff like Shadowlands. So I'm sure that a Scorpion and Scorpion Bushi, and specifically the Bayushi Bushi, will eventually be in. It's just a matter of when. I kind of hope they do it in Courts of Stone just to get it out of the way so people stop complaining, but I don't really know what the design decisions go into picking those schools. But if you're concerned about the lack of Bushi-tagged schools for the sake of combat characters, oh no, Shosuro's really good at that, and that's one of the things I want to talk about. They are killing machines. So, like I said, that'll definitely be next. If you have any other things, leave them in the comments. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a like. That keeps us motivated and lets us know that people are watching this. If you're new here and haven't already, subscribe to the channel, get more of these. Like I said, I'm going to do them more frequently. Also, I do reviews of stuff like the novellas and the source books. I do news sometimes when new stuff is announced. Courts of Stone is running through a lot of previews, so we'll be sure to talk about that. Lots of people are getting edgy about Deer Clan. We'll see how that actually turns out in text. I've learned not to necessarily trust the tone of FFG preview articles. So there's that to catch up. Even if you're already subscribed, you might consider hitting the bell for notifications so you know when we post a new video or when we live stream or other stuff. At some point, we will be doing actual plays of Legend of the Five Rings. Even my home group guys are like, okay, we get it. You're really itchy. We love this campaign we're doing, and I love the campaign we're doing right now otherwise, but you want to run some stuff. So we'll see if we might get some one-shots, or even if I can get my campaign ideas sorted out. And consider supporting us on Patreon. Obviously, since this is pretty long, there's an audio version of this episode available for download if you're a patron only. That's only $1 a month. And it will be without visual aids, obviously, but maybe it's more convenient for you to get an audio download, so check that out. And I will see you guys in the next video, and we're gonna, disappear into the shadows of the Shosuro next time. This has been Enter the Dojo. We out.